Namaskaram. I'm very happy to be here in Goddess's own country as much as God's own country, Kerala. Because I know that this state and this civilization has valued women and has been in the forefront of reimagining society in a women led way. So it's a great pleasure for me to be here and speaking to you. And of course, I see the literary efflorescence that this state is so famous for. And I witnessed the two previous sessions, although I did not understand Malayalam, but I could get the music of, of the poetry that was there. I'm also a great admirer of your women writers, from Parvati Amma to Kamla Das, who have told women's stories, both the public and the private spaces, and their stories of resistance, early resistance. And now, of course, we have many other great women writers in Kerala and, of course, around India. Now, reimagining India is a theme which my novel, Swallowing the Sun, embodies. I reimagine and bring to life a period in our history, the most tumultuous period in our history, when men and women, including from Kerala, um, the Mahatma Gandhi Kelapan, for example, and many others, dared to reimagine India as a free country from colonialism. So that is one of the theme, the locale, the setting of my novel, Swallowing the Sun. And then the other aspect of this novel, which is about reimagining India, is how ordinary people at that time, not only the Mahatma Gandhis and the Madan Mohan Malviyas of that time, but how ordinary young people, men and women, really came forward and contributed their might to the independence movement. And without them, the Mahatma Gandhis, the Madan Mohan Malviyas of the world would not have succeeded to get independence. So that the contribution of each individual, I think it's so important to recall that period, to recall how young people, so this is very much a novel about young people, for young people, and about young people, and what they can do today to reclaim that same space that they had in the freedom movement, in building a new India, in reinventing and reimagining India themselves, their societies, and their country, and also their civilizational. It was a time of great civilizational rebirth, a cultural renaissance. I'm sure in Malayalam literature also that period was very fertile. But also in Maharashtra, I evoke in the novel the cultural and literary and theater related renaissance that happened. And that was the sole force driving the independence movement. Without the cultural aspect, the poetry, the songs, uh, the plays, without them, the, the momentum, the elixir for inspiration would not have been there. So that's the other aspect of reimagining India, cultural, literary, theater, and all of that related efflorescence and renaissance that I've tried to capture in the book. And I'm going to be also reading poetry and passages from the book to illustrate all of this. The other aspect that I want to tell you about is I was born to my parents when they were 45. And although I was born much after independence, I always felt from their stories and their experiences, from the poetry that they recited, the theater that I was exposed to, that I could actually capture and imagine that period in my novel without actually living in that period. And that is one of the things, of course, writers do. They reimagine what it would have been like to be in that period, to be a man, woman, child in that period. So that's what I have done. And it's also about telling the grand story against the sweep of this independence movement, but it's also about telling the stories within the stories of women and men who lived and dared to really break all barriers, break boundaries, who it is about the path to empowerment, conquest of victimhood, because there was this, particularly among women, but also amongst all Indians, this sense of victimhood. But how do you conquer that? So, conquest of victimhood, and also the audacity of the deathless human spirit that I try to bring out in the novel. Now, the title, you may be quite intrigued by the title. The title is drawn from a 13th century saint, Muktabai. She was the sister of Jnaneshwar, Sant Jnaneshwar, but not much is known about her outside Maharashtra. She is, of course, now regarded as Shakti Devi, but in her, she was a great poetess and a teenager when she wrote all this poetry. So I have been very much taken by that abhanga of hers, which I will recite first in Marathi and then in English, render it in English. मुंगी उडाली आकाशी, तिने गिळले सूर्याशी, थोर नवलव झाला, बांज पुत्र प्रसवला, विंचू पाताळासी जाय, शेष माथा बंदी पाय, माशी व्याली घार झाली, देखूनी बुक्ताबाई हसली. The ant, the little ant, she flies into the sky and swallows the sun. The barren woman gives birth to a son. A scorpion burrows down to the nether realms, and the snake Shesha king bows his head at its feet. The housefly begets a hawk. Muktabai sees all, Muktabai laughs. So, the idea that is conveyed in this abhanga is, if you have faith, if you dare, if you persevere, you can make the impossible possible. You can make miracles. And the characters, particularly the women characters in my book, in my novel, they are touched by a certain magic to dare to achieve the impossible. Whether they succeed or not, whether there is triumph or tragedy. And it is also true of some of the men characters. And also, if you look at the national stage, and then I come back to the question of reimagining India, because this is about reimagining yourself and your society and country on an audacious scale. So, even Mahatma Gandhi or other Veer Savarkar, the other major, or Netaji, each one of them was driven by this desire to break all boundaries, to achieve what seemed at that time, it seems to us, oh, it was so easily got, but at that time it seemed impossible. So that is the spirit in which this Abhang has been used, cutting across all the themes. It's an epic love story in epic times. It is a coming of age novel, how young people, young girls and boys, they grow up reimagining themselves. It cuts across also the family saga that this is, and it is, of course, part of the freedom struggle related issues. Now, in the novel, there are different ways in which I explore reimagining and women's empowerment and changing gender roles. For example, Baba is the father of Malti, the heroine, and her sister Kamla, is a very enlightened man who does not allow his daughters, at that time there used to be child marriages and child motherhood, so he does not allow his daughters to get married early, but wants to educate them. And he puts them into an orphanage school after their mother's death. And as they are returning from the school on a vacation, there is a conversation which I thought is really about reimagining what girls should be like or what their roles should be like. So he says, Malti and Kamla, I'd rather that, they ask Baba to imagine that he can be a collector if he learns English. So he says, why should I be a collector? How about you being a collector? So then, I'd rather you too become collectors. Would you like that? Baba said, women don't become collectors, Baba, replied Kamla. Nothing can stop you. See what the nationalist leaders are saying, Baba replied. He then told them about how leaders, especially Mahatma Gandhi, were demanding freedom from British rule while saying that we must free our women too and make them equal partners in the freedom struggle. They may even come preaching to the princely state of Indore or to Vaishali. When Kamla asked how they could join the freedom fighters, Baba replied, no, you don't need to do anything except study for now. Knowledge is the weapon you must learn to use. That's what the British did. When the time comes, you will find a way to contribute. So at that time, young people were going in for higher education were conflicted, but particularly women. This was Malti's generation, was the first generation of women going into postgraduate, and my novel is set in the period 1918 to 1950. So for them, the choice was, should they continue with their education or join the satyagraha protests? Should they be picketing? Should they be courting arrest, as the Congress was asking them to do? So it is within that context that this debate continues through much of the novel as to whether they should give up their studies and join the freedom movement, and to what extent they can push the frontiers on that. Then there is this play that I get the characters. The Guru is the hero and Malti, the heroine. They stage a play of a very revolutionary and very respected playwright, Varerkar. M.V. Varerkar called Satte Che Gulam. That is the enslavement of power, the title of the play. And that play, in its dialogues, in the way the characters discuss nationalism, what is, and man-woman relationships, etc. I think that is that chapter, the play within the play, brings out the ideas of reimagining India so well. I just want to read a few passages from that. So, Malti is asked to audition for the part of the heroine of the play, Nalini. And which is the passage she chooses? She chooses this passage. What do these men think about women? Are we only playthings or animals? Are all men trained to view women thus? How will they be anything beneficial to the country with this attitude when they view the value, virtue, and goodness of their own daughters, mothers, and sisters in such a derogatory and distrustful manner? How can they be capable of saving humanity from its ills? So, the message is very clear that you cannot reimagine India as a free country unless you free women from oppression. Then, being part of Varerkar's play was a lesson, and this is a very important thing because this is a literature festival. The power of words, the power of vocabulary, the vocabulary we use to represent gender roles. So, Nalini, the heroine, who is an educated, empowered woman ahead of her times, she's called Mahatma by a very adoring and admiring friend, Shama. So, what is Nalini's reaction to that? She says, even grammar has surrendered and failed women because there is no feminine word for Mahatma. So, these are the kind of language and literary issues that are brought out in the novel and in the context of the play within the play. So then, when they stage the play, what they do also is that they set up action groups. They use the play as an excuse to gather people, and then they set up these cells that support the Satyagraha movement. And later, Guru and Malti join their classmate Yusuf Ali in the Simon Commission protests, and they get lathi charged and injured. And then later, Malti, when she becomes a lawyer, she fights a political trial of revolutionaries. So there is that theme as well in the novel of which is the best way to get independence, which is the best way to take India to its destiny. Even today, we ask those questions. The ideological contestations of those times are very much reflected in today's times, whether it is Varerkar versus Congress, the Hindutva versus the Muslim League, and all of those debates are really rehearsed by the young people of those times, and they resonate with the young people today. And then there is the Ek Bharat, Shreshth Bharat theme, because unity has always been an issue in reimagining India. We have to shed the caste, the linguistic, regional, and other vociferous tendencies and unite as one. That message the young people keep realizing is critical for throwing the British out, but at the same time they despair often that it is so intractable, it's so ingrained that it's difficult to get out. And so, 75 years after the adoption of the Constitution of India, which talks about equality and social justice, we still are struggling with those issues. So I wanted to highlight them so that today's young people look at these issues from the perspective of history and what history teaches us. So, Guru, Vaikunt's soul had captured Guru and provided some answers. He challenged Kairopant and set out what true patriotism was. To you, to you, to you, Kairopant, the motherland is an abstract idea visible only on a map. So, how many of us think that way? That is an abstract idea only visible on a map. My mother India is concrete, tangible, stretching from the highest peaks of the Himalayas to the southern tip of India, where the seas seek to swallow up Sri Lanka. It is encapsulated in the service of her poor, dispossessed, and oppressed children, he declared. So, this is the patriotic and the definition of patriotism, which is also about service. And then, of course, there is the issue of how that generation used poetry to fire themselves up, to whip up the passion to participate in the freedom movement. And Savarkar's Star of the Motherland, where he says, Nabhi nakshatra bahut ek pari pyara, maza bharat bhumi sa tara. So there are many stars in the firmament, but there is only one beloved to me, the star of my motherland, Bharat. And then there is also, after the Elphinstone College principal remonstrates with Guru for putting up a patriotic play and threatens suspension, they come out and then they go to the beach and in full Veer Ras, they sing Yashwant's very famous poem, which is Turunga Chad Darat, that is in the door of the prison. And he says, Vadude kara gurhacha bhintichi unchi kiti manmana nahi shiti भिंतीच्या उंचीत राये काय आत्मा कोंडुनी मुक्त तो रात्रंदिनी भक्तीला जो पुराला वाढतो तो अंतरी पायरीने पायरी. So, let the walls of the prison grow higher and higher. My strong heart will never be shaken or tire. My patriotic soul can't ever be kept in thrall. It is free to roam in the day and at nightfall. My devotion to my motherland rises within me step by step, like flood waters gushing to be free. Now, among the political contestations of the time was that there is a character who's changing his repertoire of patriotic action. Sometimes he's a satyagrahi, sometimes he's a Veer Savarkar follower and a revolutionary, and later he joins Netaji. So this character, however, becomes an anti-Congress person for various reasons, and there is this debate that goes on. Guru and Malti shared their plans of discreetly supporting Gandhi's Satyagraha movement, but um, Mohan Kaka said, okay, let's have a Bharat Manthan Baitak. And after that, if you're not convinced by me, then you go ahead and join Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha movement. And then there is this debate, even today, our metro cities, they are a hub of so much of political activity, of political mobilization, but equally cultural and social change. So, look at what he says. Since I came here years ago to Bombay, I have seen the rivers of different communities and castes joining the sea of Bombaykars, spanning all trades and professions, from the dock and mill workers to the sailors, from lawyers and accountants to clerks and administrators. It is the Manthan of Savarkar's Hindu Ocean here in Bombay that will bequeath the Amrit of Bharat's freedom, says Mohan Kaka. So, this is a very important point that cities, and that's why Bombay became a hub of the freedom movement. And I'm sure in Kerala also there were cities, including Thiruvananthapuram, where there was this mobilization. And people forgot where they came from. All that mattered was where they are going and where they are going to take India. So that is the spirit I invoke. Then, indeed, Bombay is truly the crucible of an emerging new aspirational India and beats to the rhythm of the many drums of the freedom movement, Kamla commented loftily. Then there is a debate on the nature of British colonialism. But the question is, I ask myself often, that unlike most previous conquerors, the British have remained alien, never become one with the people of India. So, will that be a strength or a weakness? And will this Manthan succeed against them? Malti wondered. Strength, because nearly 3 lakh Britons in a country of over 20 crores are invisible to the majority of people. So most don't know or care about who their upstream exploiters are. For their immediate oppressors are familiar Indians, the landlord, the petty babus, the tehsildars, the money lenders, the lawyers, the police, the factory owners and managers. That is the strength of the British, and that's what we are up against, Mohan Kaka says. And also, the young people then realized that the churning of Savarkar's Hindu Ocean was incomplete. They say high caste Hindus have been guilty of keeping the low castes out of their temples and homes. So, this exclusion of Indians by the British is not new to them. That is why we need to unite all castes into one Hindu Rashtra and abolish untouchability and discrimination to drive out the British, Kamla said, eliciting approving looks from Kaka. And then, of course, about the Macaulays, Babus, and Western educated elite who were getting impatient and who then were leading the national movement. So I'll quickly skip over that. But there is a complaint, for example, that Indians can't join the civil service or that they cannot be equal before the law in the courts of India at that time. All of that complaint is there. And then Malti says, but I am optimistic because They are not Sri Krishna to hold up their mountain of an empire on a mere thumb, to hold sway over such a large, discontented mass of people who have been awakened and unified as they are getting under Mahatma Gandhi. That is the weakness of the British Raj and our strength, Malti said. And then, of course, Mohan Kaka criticizes the Congress and says this: don't waste your time and effort with Gandhi. Veer Savarkar is the real messiah of unity. He asserted that Hindu is one who regards and owns the Bharat Bhumi, the land from the Indus to the seas, as his fatherland as well as holy land, whatever form of religion of worship he may follow. It is this bond of Hindutva, without discrimination of caste or sect, which will act as a glue, not separating each community within Hinduism like Gandhi and the Congress party are doing, waging a true war of independence by whatever means possible. So, that is the other debate that is happening. What means can we use? Can we use violence? Can we use revolutionary tools? You know, Sam, Dam, Danda, Bhed. Later on, my characters refer to that a lot, to achieve independence. So that also is a debate, or passive resistance, as Mahatma Gandhi advocated, is the only way. So these are the debates that are also there in reimagining India's freedom. And then there is the Hindu Muslim question, which is also debated by the young people, and whether Congress's way of dealing with it is the right way or there should be another way. Similarly, this is a period of great civilizational awakening as it is now in India. We are finding our voice, our soul, and we are proclaiming an Indian civilizational presence, not only within India but in the world. So, at a time like this, it is really evocative to bring out the civilizational awakening related dialogues that I want to quickly refer to. Though we are, so this is a poem in their Elphinstone College class. There is a British professor, Woodhouse, by the way, the brother of the famous P.G. Woodhouse, who taught at Elphinstone College English. And he, as the last session of the class, he asked his students to read O. Shogasi's ode. It's called Movers and Shakers. Believe me, it's not a new term, you know, the very hot term that is used these days, that so and so is a mover and shaker. But this mover and shaker term goes back to that poem in the early 1920s, where he invoked the British imperial glory. And then he asked Indian students to apply it to their situation. So what does Guru say? Though we are the Indian students here, may be wandering by lone sea breakers, sitting by desolate streams, we have enough civilizational inspiration to be making our own music, dreaming our own dreams. Despite being born and raised as subject citizens, as our minds and horizons open, we have a growing belief that yet we are the movers and shakers of the world forever in a new India. But Malti is not happy with this rather tame representation of or interpretation of this poem. So, what does she do? She dares to, in a public class, go against British colonialism. And she says, Sir, I would like to dip it into the colors of Indian nationhood, the saffron of sacrifice, the green of prosperity, the white of harmony and purity that our freedom fighters have evoked. Though we young Indians may appear to be world losers and world forsakers, the evocation of each age is a dream, is dying, is about the death of British imperial glory that I desire and foresee happening soon. Of course, she's then summoned and threatened with suspension, but she conveys her views and asserts her civilizational uh, identity very strongly. Then there is, of course, the caste system, social justice and reform, those ideas that are so important for reimagining India that my book also deals with. And Malti says, because she has an intercaste marriage against much opposition, and she has to pay a heavy price, both she and her lover Guru, and they have to be separated. So she says, with all her respect for Hinduism, it was the caste fetish Malti could not accept or condone. She agreed with Veer Savarkar's concept of Hindutva, where the divisive and debilitating caste system was to be smashed once and for all. His call for one country, one God, one caste, one mind, brothers, all of us, without difference, without doubt, truly moved Malti, even though he had left out the call to sisters, all of us. So Malti added that idea in her sermon to herself. Mahatma Gandhi, too, had been rightly trying to peel off the encrustations of caste from Indian consciousness, and yet it seemed as difficult as peeling off skin itself. I would like to also uh, recall that I have used one of the most powerful poems by B.V. Tilak, which is about self realization and the right to self realization of all Indians, women and girls in particular, and which is what Malti uses. But it is also a kind of anthem of asserting one's right to self realization. Bola havete malaka yatyatse pure zan to meet samazhe bada. Jauntily holding an elephant calf in one hand, in the other with a mewling lion cub I stand. The majestic tiger, half dead with fear, from his cave cautiously does peer. These mountains are mere rocks to deceive. The waves of the ocean are like trembling leaves. Recognizing myself, my name I proudly bear, I am truly self realized and self aware. Of a mirror, I have no need, or a path free of stone and weed. Am I not complete and auspicious, of God's creature felicitous? I have no more regard for your opinion. I well know my own strength, my own dominion. So, this is the sentiment also in interpersonal relations, but also in relation to seeking freedom for the country. And the last part that I would like to refer to is how, um, man, I have explored this concept of Ardhanarishwar in the novel. How man woman relationships were being reimagined at that time, and they continue to be reimagined. So, Guru, the hero of this novel, he deifies Malti. He proclaims his love for Malti and he deifies her and calls her a goddess to be installed in the sanctum sanctorum of his temple. So let me read an extract from that poem to show how a man can surrender his ego to a woman, and later on, of course, she shows how she surrenders her ego for him. So, so um, we will be iconoclasts in other ways too. Show them we can be and do anything. The world will turn around us and be at your feet, seeking your benediction, my goddess. For night and day, my votive incense burns, wrapping you in spiraling wafts of grey smoke, protecting as it churns. Its distilled holy ash I smear like Shiva's vibhuti in surrender of my supreme self. The sweet ambrosial scent of Homa, the ritual fire, ignites our sacred desire. None dare thwart our love's purpose. Nandadeep, the ever glowing lamp of love, its sword of pure luminosity, cutting through seams of darkness, its little ruby tongue of flame scorching all ill will, all blame. And then he ends by saying, O Madhumalti, let the beguiling veil of Maya be once and for all pierced and fall. Between the manifest and the truth, between the striving and the attainment, between the worshipper and the worshipped, between me and you. So this is something that I wanted to share with you in terms of reimagining India in my novel, which I hope you will all get and read, and I hope sometime to have it translated in Malayalam, which is such a beautiful language.
Now we'll open the floor for some question answers if anybody has any questions.
I've been listening to you very carefully, but I have to say the theme of the novel is a bit obsolete, outdated. It doesn't speak to the present day realities of our country. Because, the present days, our country is being fragmented in terms of religion, in terms of caste, and whatnot. So, in the present day times, and especially when our youngsters are moving away from reading printed words, how do you think the book is really? How do you think the book is really very relevant when our younger generation they are moving away from printed words? When there is very little social life is now existing even in our villages. How do you think the theme of the novel is really relevant in the present day times? Please.
I think you yourself said that, on one hand, there are tendencies that are fragmenting, but also there are very strong tendencies for unification, of being one India, one civilization, one country, and also finding its rightful voice and place in the world. So, this novel, evoking an era when India was still enslaved, and how young people then sought to do exactly the same thing but in a different time and under the yoke of colonialism, is, I think, very relevant, and it really reverberates with the contestations of the present as much as the positivity that we must bring into the present and our future. We are setting a goal of a developed India, Viksit Bharat, by 2047. We are trying to also civilizationally renew ourselves and reclaim our soul. So, is it not then the right time for a novel like this to really send those messages that are necessary to be sent at this time?
Ma'am, I have a question. So my name is Akash. I'm currently the Kerala State President of the Youth United Council of India. So my question to you is, during your term in the United Nations, how was the Indian voice perceived there? Like how it was then, and at the current situation, how is it? And also one more thing, in the contemporary conflicts that are going around in the world, why hasn't the United Nations cannot effectively do something?
Well, I think there are two aspects of India in the United Nations. There are those like us, like I was for 15 years in the United Nations, but I have been dealing as an Indian diplomat with the United Nations for 28 years, actually from 1981 onwards. So there are two ways of looking at India's voice. We are very strong in the Secretariat of the United Nations, which drives and supports the member states' agenda. And there we are regarded as very, very bright, very committed, very hardworking. And in many ways, we carry on our shoulders most of the weight of uh, the mission, I would say. And you know that United Nations mission is peace and security, sustainable development, including climate change action, environmental protection. It is about humanitarian response and disaster response. It is about human rights and democracy. And it is now increasingly about how to govern technology 4.0 and how to deploy that for finding development solutions and environmental solutions. So I think this mandate, the global public goods that the UN has to deliver, India has contributed to the discourse, it has contributed to convening, and also, for example, in climate change, we have actually made commitments about going to zero, getting to zero, about the Panchamrit. The Prime Minister in COP26, I think, made an offer that India will shift to renewals, that it will reduce emissions by so much. So, we are making and we are using both the power of argument and the argument of power in this regard. Now, the question you asked very rightly, which I ask myself because I believe in the United Nations, is how come in these conflicts the United Nations has not been effective in either stopping or preventing it or stopping it, or even its humanitarian efforts have been hampered. So my answer to that is that the reality is that it's the member states and the dominant member states who determine the policies of the United Nations. And for example, the UN Security Council, which is the highest policy making body on peace and security, has not been able to do anything on Ukraine or Gaza because it's paralyzed between the P5, the permanent 5 members of the United Nations. So it is that kind of gridlock. And the Secretary General himself has admitted that the UN system, the multilateral system, is dysfunctional. So India has advocated for its reform, and in the recently held G20 as well, there is a big push being given to the reform of the entire multilateral system, including the UN and the multilateral financial institutions and other institutions.